got it.
Alright, is anyone already? Contention 1 is vertical prolife impending efforts to build an integrated East Asian missile shield actually pose a credible threat to Chinese second strike camera 19. Beijing state expanded missile defenses and stepping up U.S. first strike opportunity and effective against a full attack large-scale defensive system. Make the first strike easier. MBA is also advocating large-scale U.S. missile defense system. But sections of MBA suggest a change in the direction. Previously, China had the decree because U.S. homeland defense system not capable of intercepting a major strike. MBA is the power for considerable integration between regional strategic missile defense systems, including an expanded role for the S-3 interceptor. China seeing ambiguity between capabilities as a threat to the strategic forces and fear of BMD drives reactive modernization, spatial expansion risks. Explain the PRC's efforts to shore up its capabilities. March 19. Transmission expansion of missile defenses will incentivize China to ensure the strategic retaliation, manifesting in China developing upper alongside vehicles and renewable reentry vehicles. Production has been based on minimalism with the cost effectiveness and the intensification of future capabilities. Beijing may seriously expand the arsenal assembly of China's missile defense system, and a sprint to parity is a real possibility. Missile defense creates strong incentives for China to pursue and enhance stockpile. Logan 17. China ongoing modernization has changed the character of nuclear forces, changes that driven by desire to maintain the country's security capability. China identified advancing U.S. capabilities. Missile defense as areas that due to nuclear forces, China possesses underlying atomic industrial and technological basis to attempt to sprint to parity. Chinese nuclear policies are driven by the perceived threats from the U.S. expanding BMD, including activate Chinese threat receptions and trigger nuclear breakout, and modernization ratchets up the risk of catastrophic accidents, launch on warning, and increasingly complex C3 systems. Terror 19. China's evolving capabilities will present significant issues could lead to launch on warning, the new dual capable missiles increasing dispersal and rise the number of deployable levels at the very least. Complicated C3 system concern that is a human error malfunction, lead to escalation, and Cold War proves that smaller nuclear weapons enterprises are subject to a launch list of potential trigger events. Phase 15. Cold War demonstrated that multiple weapons to nuclear war, including accident. 1. Dysfunctional organized additional dynamics. 2. Degraded decision making. 3. Technological mud affairs. 4. Accidental detonation. 5. More loss of control. Trigger events. Increase strategic and civil divide. Increase the presence to escalate to nuclear time fast. Smaller nuclear weapons enterprises always play the possibility that events will occur. Which states were colliding over existential interests, and U.S.-China crises are inevitable. Likelihood of escalation is determined by the nature and number of nuclear forces hiding behind 18. China's rising reconfiguring global policy at an exceptionally rapid pace. The U.S. face challenges to its position as hegemon on the order. Global commitments and the cost balance of complex representation have led to the decline of historically increased chances of war. Power transition periods that are the conflicts around Taiwan and the east and south China Sea, those Bradley Islands, the Great Peninsula, smart crises, all the contested fight that consideration nuclear options and nuclear potential will be directly affecting the nature and number of nuclear forces, and vertical prolife outweighs only an exchange involving two large arsenals has the potential to culminate in extinction and conquer 17. All the nuclear war after the incentives moving to the atmosphere for those weapons illegal drop to global temperature 8 degrees Celsius to make it impossible to grow nuclear food. Their extinction would be greater than 2 billion risk. This might be small war, but 2 billion risk. This might be pessimistic wars on the scale unlikely to lead to human extinction. And China is a purely defensive nuclear power, and a few test stockpiles, no TNWs, no history of coercion and ideology. Pan 18. In Chinese nuclear weapons, play only one role to deter Western defense is described by Chinese nuclear doctrine as a minimal deterrence. Conditional view implies that China has no need to engage in objects. No doubt China has maintained a several world wars. China is going to delete number of tests and maintain a minimum number of warheads. Also, China sees no need to develop non-strategic weapons such as TNW. China has taken a approach to relatively different from other nuclear weapon states. Social system has consistently supported a non-allied, independent foreign policy, and thus the plan the United States federal government should substantially reduce its foreign military sales of arms from the United States in accordance with the strategy that accepts vulnerability to Chinese nuclear forces and contention to its solvency. Limiting BMD assistance to allies in the Asia Pacific is sufficient to allay Chinese fears. Coup 14. Complicating factor in the U.S.-China relationship has been BMD assistance to allies in Asia, including BMD and its incarnations of the missile defense and its cooperation with these Asian allies, Japan, and South Korea, in discussion of integrating these systems into American global system. And China is invariably concerned that this cooperation can be incorporated in the region-wide system. Chinese fears U.S. military are going to BMD becoming the technological lead for a missile blockade in East Asia. The ring begins in Japan, stretches the nation in South China Sea. Even a moderate voice of the U.S. policy is targeting China, and foreign military sales of Aegis shore sites are a prerequisite to further regional expansion. Caraco 18. A vision of much more about missile defense in the Asia Pacific hinges upon the conversation of Aegis and shore sites. The significance is while they understood that these sites will form the base upon which it up to China, assuming the process for FMS comes along. This has broad implications for the U.S. and proximity matters. Domestic deployments are irrelevant, absent and effective regional infrastructure. Hurricane 15. Missile defense has prompted serious sites and concerning swings not so much for the current U.S. architecture, but rather than the U.S. Missile defense might become the major challenges discriminating between real warheads and decoys to address the challenge the U.S. is deploying radar in Japan and South Korea. So the U.S. implement should Washington should not have fixed limits on the missile defense. Chinese arsenal provides only the first record uncertainty. Chinese modest nuclear arsenal could be neutralizing even a small scale U.S. ballistic missile defense system if the systems were effective enough, and a unilateral concession on BMD paves the way for a more comprehensive bilateral agreement. But Psalm 109. U.S. attempts to engage other countries in missile defense as soon as part of the attempts to secure the obsolete nuclear control of China and Germany that face in the level of negotiation. China and these analysts are uniformly advocating a bilateral concession on the part of the United States to start the process of the U.S. expected to demonstrate a physical commitment, seasonal of these concerns are just Chinese are low to even China's role in the process, much less advocate that it's active participation. And Trump is looking for a win on arms control, PTI 11.5. U.S. states talks with China, make sure total borders really kind of major agreement with China, and no all costs of BMD is the linchpin of perception of compromise second strike of offense alone is enough. Done 19. The first time I got knocked on a good number of installations of the remaining arsenal will be capable of delivering annihilation when you throw the ABM systems into the mist, things are nowhere here. Nation might be able to stop. We can second track this changes the context completely. China increasing the alarm systems properly. That North Korea will could never prevent might eventually use to upon a superpower strike, a second strike, and restraint is the best option. Disclose the capabilities check regional threats and modernization outpaces defense. Kickoff 13. Just not to deploy Block 2 is unlikely to harm regional defense capabilities. Japan can adequately defend against the North Korean threat without 1A and 1B in exchange for US to restrain the US China goes down to ICBMs that has captain's missiles at that level and agreed not to murder. The other two options: one, siege not China, second strike, or two, expect multiple vulnerability and stabilize the relationship starting to eliminate the second strike, and not possible it could lead to nuclear arms races should the US siege and neutralize China missiles. China could build more developments of withstanding countermeasures and investments would be effective and low cost and interference in the investment of the United States would have to make the attempt to counter them. And plus, future boost phase deployments will dispel any doubt about our ability to counter North Korea. Done 19. That happens in a system that determines rogues that disable relation among major powers with new technology may offer way out with advances in later technology, network communication, firewall, these phase advances within reach, allowing these to deliver by 2020. Peace phase must be close to the target season and set. Intercept North Korean missiles when launches from deep within China and unlike turn forward or blend system, they can have verifiably limited ranges and credibility theories of blocking US from start and judged by reputation for solve or reputation for judgment. Wall 15. Official credibility was misplaced a reputation for being top and work the way at least landed and capabilities to show that states do not try to commandments by looking at how a state how a country acted when the situation is quite different diplomacy defense less on endlessly reaffirming our wall and more on building competence than the analytical capacity of American foreign policy credibility is the key. Early messages to judgment, analyzing issues intelligently, setting clear and sensible priorities, and being able to rethink the course of action in response to events. And scenario analysis is pedagogically valuable, enhances creativity and self-reflexivity, deconstructs cognitive biases, and enables the creation of alternative futures. Barma 16. Scenario analysis are hammers to decision makers and future technical about conventional extrapolation. Scenario analysis is seen as serving a corporate planning or policy. It's not inherently limited. Scenario analysis are regularly alternative to scenarios exclusive of forecast over prediction based on linear extrapolation. They are not hypothesis based for predictions, or should they be equated with simulations which are extrapolations? They are not hypothesis based prediction, or should they be equated with simulations which are representation of real institutions instead that are depiction of possible future states alone together with their different causal force that can lead to these futures. Futures may scenario analysis practically leads to imagining alternatives. There's the world through a structured analytical process enables policymakers to envision thereby adapt to something altogether different from the known present. Participants learn strategies for avoiding closer behavior and for returning the assumptions that prevent scholars and analysts from anticipating and understanding.
Cool. What BMD systems does the app produce?
So the app broadly reduces sales of BMD that could potentially threaten Chinese ICBMs. However, specifically in the status quo, that would be the Block 2A and Block 2B sales ongoing to Japan.
Okay. The other Aegis systems that have been deployed on places like ships that are in East Asia, why do those not have access to Chinese ICBMs?
I mean, we will have several answers throughout the debate. The most important one as of the 1AC is that those naval assets cannot be effective absent integration with a land-based regional infrastructure. Our evidence is actually quite good on that question, and it says that the FMS process in particular is key to the procurement of those infrastructure sites.
All right. Well, I want to talk about each of those two answers. I'll start with the second one, the FMS process. The U.S. has sold other BMD systems to Japan through the FMS process over the last 10 years. Why do none of those systems stop?
The Block 1A and Block 1B are sufficient to check regional threats, which is going to be one of our answers to DISADS. However, all of our evidence assumes those systems and says that only continued development could possibly...
Didn't you just say those were the systems that the app reduces?
No, that's Block 1A and 1B. The app reduces Block 2A and 2B.
Oh, sorry. I got the numbers confused. Okay. I want to also talk about the first part of that. Why does China perceive an integration with land-based systems as key, and why do other land-based systems already in East Asia not solve?
I mean, our evidence speaks to the perception, and we think that perception makes sense and is rooted in reality, in that the Carico evidence is an expert in the field of missile defense saying that absent integration and power aggregation using those Aegis Ashore sites that Japan is procuring right now, there's no way that we're actually going to be able to discriminate between warheads and decoys. There's no way we're going to be able to...
Okay, I don't think that answers my question. You're speaking a lot to sort of what the U.S. is capable of doing should there be a war between the U.S. and China. My question was about Chinese perceptions, i.e. why does China not perceive other land-based systems combined with the naval Aegis systems we deployed as
I'm pretty sure I framed the question, framed my answer to the question in terms of Chinese perception. My argument is just that the integration between the land-based systems that they're procuring through the FMS process is uniquely key.
Okay.
We have evidence that speaks to that. There are
Sure.
several warrants for why that's so.
Okay.
It increases the efficiency of systems because you can aggregate
Sure.
the different capabilities of Japan and the United States.
Sure.
In addition, you have to discriminate between
Okay, that makes
warheads
sense.
and decoys.
Okay. Why does China care about a, quote, strategy that accepts vulnerability to Chinese nuclear forces? Like, what is the symbolic value of that?
Well, our point is that absent mutual vulnerability and adopting a nuclear posture that accepts mutual vulnerability, China will embark upon a dangerous modernization program.
Okay.
I might not be understanding the question, but
No, that makes sense to me. Okay, I want to ask about this piece of coup evidence that's on the solvency flow. Towards the bottom of it, it had. Oh, never mind.
Okay, I'm sorry, good. The order is going to be 6 off. Hi, Sam.
Yep. Here you go.
Sorry.
Are you hot? Freezing here.
Set 6 off.
Yep. Let me know whenever it's good. Good? First off, topicality substantial reduction must be greater than 2.7% of total arms sales of mortality arms sales, or else substantial making up only 2.7%, violation only 12 countries account for more than 2.7% of arms sales in Japan. BNP is one of them voting issue for limiting on the US sales more arms for more than 98 countries. Their interpretation multiplies every weapon system or military service by 98. Our interpretation forces the active focus on the largest customers or readout that cover arms sales more broadly. It's otherwise impossible to be negative. Nation specification is a voting issue deck. Background and access station counterplans that works or neg on all theoretical justifications by my counterplans. The counterplan text United States federal government should release a 2020 missile defense review. MBR explicitly saying that the people of the Republic of China is no longer considered a threat, and that missile defense is needed to contain the MBR should only throw rogue states such as North Korea and say missile defense is only for defense purposes. The MBR should reference it and it has to be blocked to interceptor against the ICBM class targets and end the development of NEG, a generation multi-object vehicle for the ground-based interception by CBM, or has a equals countermeasures. The United States federal government should adopt a never-use policy of birds nuclear weapons and offer to establish a U.S. China nuclear dialogue and pursue an extension of the New START treaty. The United States federal government should acknowledge vulnerability to Chinese nuclear polar forces as the basis for the U.S. China strategic relationship in mind. Features as the missile defense review is what is causing China to freak out regardless of capabilities. It counterclaim reverses our public position that in 2019 U.S. NDR and release of the sort of the distinction of trying to target the NDR as the developed S3 block 2 interceptor against the ICBM cluster by 2020 developed the next generation multi-object illegal with ground-based interception by ICBM or has an equals countermeasures what the capability of materialize or not that realizing to provoke counter responses from adversaries to developments of the by competition China the impact of strategic competition bought by NDR likely to travel down through Asia and China to be forced to the fundamentals of the NDR significantly access for the AI and up to the existing strategic practice in South Asia and that's all actions in the accident scenario implies the US concessions necessary to get China to agree to back down. China wants to counterplan not the act of weakening it. It's not cause that's here not the Greenhill retreat and Centauro and I think the Beijing and that's all the reiterations from Washington urging the US to adopt an acceptable to vulnerability free conditions for a nuclear dialogue between Washington and launching for and to counter Beijing the help Washington and dialogue interesting Chinese decisions as well the Washington Beijing development framework for a lot more stable predictable strategies in relation to launching dialogue will be and multiple concessions are made on Washington would need to acknowledge that it is only the case in Washington the United States and China will trade which is the number one relation to Washington and pursue and extension of new China's fire in 2020 the reduces Beijing that Washington and Moscow can't perfect their large nuclear forces the BMG cooperations that drive reviews Japan coordination and the faith in extended assurance the after Japanese nuclear and conventional proliferation of 1989 the US Japan represents BMG the most aspect of the honorable security cooperation to advance versions of interceptors like the high level capability Japan operates an early warning radar system it's a resource system the US military supply to the BF factory units in the 70s to vessel the US and now as you expand readers in the emergence of the key driver alliance formation those Canadians to feed information for the effective and spark identification trying to find the joint BDX from the world development of that as a block 2A which Japan expects to acquire the going and concern about the modernization for the engine and China deterrence from involved in the 2018 MDR and the lack of confidence in guaranteeing that the champion to reconsider the status on nuclear negative consequences including reduced international standing of the nuclear neither of 3 economic sanctions triggering economic by China instability around the US lines system and the DC lines nuclear arms in Asia that may develop conventional strike capability on over deterrence and Japan will develop offensive strike nuclear war that's for 19 Japan strike going to decrease confidence in the US power then interpreted by the side that Tokyo's losing confidence in a certain chain reaction increasing instability in the environment for tense as a result of North Korea's nuclear weapons island over a brief information in the AE and the CSR and the dialogue and territorial disputes increasing gradually in conflict and the escalating into war Beijing would preemptively causing escalation of drawing the US and Japan are relations they draw that over call this important Japan strike derail this over Chinese CS and China also going to be declining code and hedging and retentions had to also lead to Chinese assertiveness the environment change the US reactions to try to reliability and the Japan moving forward with conventional strike even the structure worsen security the counterplan text the care of the Joint Chiefs of Staff should issue national military strategy corresponding strategic concept and implementation that states that reducing foreign military sales of arms to the United States in accordance with the strategy that accept vulnerability to Chinese nuclear forces necessary to achieve the national security goals of the United States and must follow such military strategy establishes transparency that's financial and addresses the keys of government overarching strategic plans and strategy that identify the government and military as it means that the national security challenges identified and integrated by the Secretary of Defense and despite the deal for USMCA and the House CGOP and the Senate is an onboarding issues are critical and will secure positive with bills could still be derailed the score goal. 1213 even after the announced the support the ratification of USP and by the Republican concern avoids the concerns of White House and many Republican senators significant concern that could derail but a passage that was in Washington is the USMCA to be passed the Senate is around the lawmakers and the percentage of 100% of supported Republicans are happy to guarantee USMCA passage spread to not guarantee the coming weeks negotiating terms will be able to reach agreements and the details and lobbies ensure the plan causes backlash that divides the Senate's hate and I'm going to try the U.S. Armed Forces have government working hand in hand with the state and across the industry doing the Congress and across the industry the force the campaigns of lawmakers and both parties into the 17th block and this is starting with responsibility and the hand lobbying the end of the Dems or broke the party and then sales continue to buy versus tens of thousands of passage bills Congress going to have to pass muscle the arms industry the ongoing border crimes the influence of money Washington the USMCA and CEO tech leadership and global semiconductor supply chain that's also 18 and successfully ratifying USMCA and the global semiconductor supply chain from the American school protector leadership ensure that more products remain in America including 10 products and semiconductors can be shipped to customers around the world 10 leadership prevents extinction of cyber as a team leadership and tech in the courts and hard power the measures of economic day by PCB competitors are constantly evolving and adjusting country by engineering innovative that provide the catalyst for military tools and modern data intelligence and evidence and ability to network control infrastructure to everything by agents against devastating attack and innovation and industrial and regional politics of approaching force the U.S. cannot afford to permit its initial the international order by the unended.
But case.
Your evidence is not reverse causal to reference the missile defense systems that already exist and proves first you don't solve and second there's no impact because China has been referencing this issue for 20 years and 20 CQ 14 the developments are not entirely new. They're highlighted as early as China's 2000 defense by paper the African and BMD are also in defense South Korea the priority for BMD cooperation tool as reported in destroyer in June 2012 but through their actual capabilities creating two system China's and have very concerned that cooperation may incorporate into a region-wide system these are laying the foundation for regional BMD and this is an incorporated Japan, South Korea, Australia, and Taiwan and the US has other BMD deployed into Japan that's FDA 18 the Japan signal to produce the BMD back to the 2003 judges were supplemented the factory the BMD boundaries of the deployed around Turkey and Berlin Okinawa while the Japan also has a radar system and talking about the Turkey and the US has deployed as a factory battery and Haganani Cosmos cruiser to Japan since 2006 it's all the BMD not just cooperative efforts with China threatened to all 15 the efforts of the United States defense also listed opposition in any stage the Chinese government is long and highly critical of the US nation all the ways the opposition to the honorable and missile capabilities of the country and the group of countries and low includes Chinese breakout it's not likely that Silicon 17 and Chinese nuclear arsenal and the strategy of control by Silicon to the utility nuclear weapons more information would face several hard technical solutions in pursuing the China and nuclear breakout which the commentators warned China modernization is a for offensive use fully to secure secondary capabilities in Silicon 17 and Chinese nuclear forces are controlling the nuclear leadership believe the deterrence and effect of the arsenal research the fundamental views of not Chinese forces are believed to be small and less than major commanding warheads and missiles of peace and China standing with DU0 deploy weapons modernization appear to be driven by damage to practically not a year nukes and hard constraints prevent full scale modernization Silicon 17 China has based over our technical barriers but China effort and designed to be powerful the China production like an ideal base of fidelity modern side and base production negotiate the internal community by testing China's boarding infrastructure capability neutral capabilities organizational agreements and China but avoided China and rely on conservative the designs and giving them requirements the limit of software in most cases China can produce more than 450 analysts are more expensive assuming that China funding is more expensive than survivability usability China nonetheless face hard obstacles and should I go back to the piece man?
No, you should read that card.
Okay.
That card is mistagged though. It's supposed to say nuclear accidents.
Okay. Nuclear accidents is empirically denied safety. Procedures over robust and escalation gets progressively more difficult and it doesn't escalate that's dangerous. As a news and nuclear weapons the main responsible for reading incredible close on and not supposed to reach and possible to take place in all operations to take part working on such as in the US and some others and so being evaluation was quickly corrected and taking greater care than any situation nuclear accidents make up for mechanisms to ensure the nuclear weapons can be used by mistake to fail safe procedures while still phenomenology and confirmation necessary for self-defense and safety mechanisms working in and 96 rudimentary to president matter what president made a decision about all allegedly no more information about even to three missiles the vulnerability of failure increases only condition not change condition of safety perfecting without becoming more complex and less in the past accident and learning the intercept with the finger on the button and the use of suggested not first further the tradition of non-use is stronger than human face real Soviet use officials were able to refrain from using full instruction on the extreme coast accuracy that learned from the made way the violence on their approach to three and even never intended to interfere with retaliation of various use and nuclear weapons all the traditional non-use of very quickly would being nuclear torpedo and accidentally led to the global thermonuclear exchange not equally likely countries will not have to best to limit escalation. Market part of escalation.
Right, good for prospects? Right, status of the counterplans?
Conditional.
Can you hit flanks?
For the first counterplan, we will defend sort of each paragraph individually. So the first part will defend the first block, so we can kick that, or we can kick the second part.
Okay, that's fine. the MDR counterplan, the mitral evidence, where does it make the claim that like it's sort of reverse causal, that the MDR can actually decrease the fear of like Chinese perceptions?
So the micro evidence sort of makes a claim about sort of what is causing Chinese fears in
Right.
the first place. We made a claim that sort of getting rid of that thing should probably inevitably get rid of sort of the fears that do exist. Right? Because the micro evidence sort of claims that BMG is not what China fears, but rather sort of things that in the missile defense review. Sorry.
Okay. The NMS counterplan,
Yeah.
how does it reduce FMS?
It doesn't reduce FMS. We would say that we fiat that the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff would sort of collaborate over whether to do so, and then when that happens, it's a question sort of whether that
Wait, how does
happens.
he
We only
collaborate?
fiat that the discussion happens.
Counterclaim, it makes a bunch of amendments to the MDR. Does it actually fiat that the U.S. follows through on those amendments?
Yeah, the Missile Defense Review is binding, right? It binds U.S. nuclear
It's just
posture.
a policy statement.
Right, but it's a binding. The U.S. law
It's
includes
not a law.
Yeah, we will defend that the U.S. follows through on what it says in the Missile Defense Review.
You will?
Yes.
Okay. So when it says reference an end to the SM-3 Block 2A interceptor, why isn't that the F?
That part. So there's a distinction. The first few things that the MDR says that the U.S. will do things. The second part of the MDR says that the second part of the counterplan text says that the MDR will reference that is possible.
Okay,
So we'll defend that the U.S.
don't fiat that the U.S. follows through.
We
just
fiat that the U.S.
reference
follows through on.
possibility.
Okay. Do you want me to go through each part and tell you what the distinction is?
Well, I would like to know what the counterplan does.
Yes. Okay. The part of it that says that the People's Republic of China, it says that we will defend that the U.S. sort of adopts a nuclear strategy that follows that. The MDR should only reference rogue states such as North Korea. We'll fiat that the USFG does that. State that missile defense is only for defensive purposes. We'll fiat that. Reference an end to SM-3 Block 2A. Referencing the end is not the same as saying that the U.S. will do it, so the U.S. does not necessarily do that.
Okay, so we still do deploy the SM-3 Block A.
Correct.
Gotcha.
We will defend that the SM-2 Block 3A is still deployed.
Okay, that's fine. The NMS counterplan,
Yeah.
how does it shape military strategy?
Yeah, so the minor evidence is pretty good about this, sort of explains the way that NMS operates. The Joint Chiefs of Staff are able to sort of influence executive policy. The documents are binding, means that
How does the Joint Chief of Staff influence policy?
I mean, I think that's just a question of like what happens in the government, but
Wait, I'm thinking that. Okay, it's done. Let me know when y'all get it.
Yeah.
here we are. Let me check. Louise, I'm sorry, I have to tell. I know it is.
Gotcha. Order is going to be the advantage, be substantial, the NMS counterplan, the advantage counterplan, the policy cassette, the assurances cassette. BMD expansion direction after Chinese modernization versus nuclear war through accidents, framing issue, only big arsenals enable an exchange of sufficient intensity to end the species, and accidents are the only scenario for WMDU's mad checks and intentional escalation. They say BMD already exists. Our evidence assumes it says that only future deployments will pose a credible threat to Chinese second strike. They say the Chinese have referenced it for 20 years. That's a framing issue in terms of evaluating the rhetorical reassurance aspect of their counterplan. We've been lying, and Trump has confirmed as much. However, it definitely doesn't thump the app because it's a question of capabilities, not intentions. They say the U.S. has other BMD assets. One, we think we should get sweeping attitudinal veto us for meaningful debates about grand strategy as opposed to procedural tweaks. Second, they conceded the arms control internal link. The plan is a material unilateral concession that brings the Chinese to the bargaining table. Trump will secure a win and agree to mutual limitations per the Hickok evidence. Third, the plan signals U.S. political opposition and forces Congress people to rationalize voting against the foreign military sale of BMD equipment, which means that they'll support broader divestment. And fourth, as we've read, fantastic integration key evidence. FMS is the only way to facilitate the procurement of Aegis ashore sites, which are necessarily key for discriminating between warheads and maximizing efficiency. They read another card that recapitulates the same argument, says that all BMD is key. However, we've made arguments as to why regional BMD and integration between that and strategic BMD is key. They group all of their arguments about the Logan evidence and definitively concludes affirmative. It substantiates the fact that they have a defensive nuclear posture now, but they might embark upon modernization should BMD continue to expand. It says that they have the underlying economic and technical capacity to overcome all of the hurdles. So the hurdles are slight disincentives to the modernization program that explain their generally defensive nuclear posture. Their last argument is that accidents are a myth. However, this doesn't assume the degree to which there were so many close calls during the Cold War. Their evidence says that they were distant. However, any familiarity proves that there were a variety of different incidents that came particularly close, including the Petrov incident. In addition, the new advancements in technology mean that arms races are only going to be more destabilizing, as well as the fact that we're winning the U.S.-China war is inevitable through the Thucydides trap and myriad flashpoints, which means that there's going to be higher levels of strategic instability than at any point in recorded history. He sucks. We need 11% form in the arms trade. 19, Japan, SM3, 1.295 billion, Aegis 2.15 billion, SM3, 1.15 billion, Aegis support 140 million, total 62, counter-interpretation 7 million, buried 16, AACA, lengthened notification, extended congressional veto power, defense equipment in excess of 7 million, institutionalizing the veto over all substantial arms sales, prefer first predictability, defer to legislative intent, second debatability, overwhelming kills topic dynamism, functional limits of the literature is checked, reasonability, good is good enough. The A-spec argument, extra resolutional theory is arbitrary and infinitely regressive. A million things we could have done to make debate slightly better, and the negative has plenty of ground on the arms sales topic and immense. Permutation of both permutation to the counterplan, the permutation that shares the Joint Chiefs of Staff Judiciary National Military Strategy corresponding strategic concept focused on implementation of the United States federal government should substantially reduce FMS of arms from the United States in accordance with strategies of steps of undervoted Chinese nuclear forces is necessary because it's necessary to achieve the additional security goals of the United States. Counterplan links and net benefit bets for political leaders have a natural stake in pleasing constituencies. NSS has been a Christmas tree on which every interest group hangs its foreign policy concerns. Counterplans that result in the AF are a voting issue. They trade off with nuanced debates about the topic and instead incentivize garbage internal net benefits as well as politics. This adds conditionality as a voting issue. It encourages running those strategies that trade off with in-depth research and instead cause a race to the margins. Dispositionality solves NMS won't lead to chains. Fever 15, the NMS in theory fit together. NSS outlines broadest goals. One step down is the NDS, one further is the NMS, which focuses on uniform military. I keep repeating supposed to be because in practice the preparation of strategic documents does not follow the neat flowchart implied by the theory. Sometimes departments and agencies that lose a battle on another document try to win back some of the ground. Another two after the budget is developed independently. The strategy of politically driven budget exercise will determine a dollar available, and then everything is chopped and tweaked to produce a strategy that comes in under the budget. And permutation do the plan as compliance with the mandate of the counterplan, the advantage counterplan. Permutation do both. Permutation do the counterplan links to the net benefit, triggers all of their linked arguments in terms of assuring allies because it has a similar perception with regards to altering the US BMD posture. Intentions are irrelevant there. Rhetorical reassurance will fail. Adversaries only perceive capabilities. Zala 19. MDR 6 mission where China started for 20 years with defenses aimed against nuclear arms, major powers, foreign policy outlooks, and intentions can change. Look at the shift from Obama to Trump. Capabilities of tomorrow matter not. Intentions of today, the NFU plan doesn't solve but incentivizes gray zone aggression. Carden in 17 NFU would not reduce the risk of unintentional war. The likelihood of intentional use at best regarded as political lip service at worst destabilizing refraining from uses considered to undermine deterrence. NFU can encourage activities under nuclear red lines in the Russian Federation. Updated in this stance, it's just words, conventional thumbs, and links worse to a pro-off that Stanley aid adopting NFU might actually encourage cooperation by weakening security terms to use nuclear posture basically relevant no matter what the posture states with the nuclear weapons away offsetting America's conventional superiority and because they fiat we lie about the Block 2 interceptor, it makes all of their other commitments not credible, and indeed will stoke Chinese suspicions when the U.S. actually does follow through on delivering those missile interceptors. Aegis sales collapse Russo-Japanese relations, escalates to Coral Islands, Round 18, the deployment of missile defense for stabilizing security in Northeast Asia, the presence of missile defense area charter for foreign military plans, sustained coordination of Aegis from Russia for Moscow to protect the U.S. undermine Russia's strategic deterrence. Aegis succeeded its latest expanding network of missile defenses and dismissive Turkey's can be independence, which have a negative impact to bilateral relations. Russian presence on the Kurils is connected with Aegis. Russia's future economic activity response to Aegis confrontation over the Kurils goes nuclear. Alvin 18, Russia defeats the aircraft from the Coral Islands, response to military defense for the U.S. back by Japan, obvious to withdraw from negotiations, centered for different Kurils proximity, both consider important Japan as space to be elected dictator state as Russia indicated precondition to re-engage talks to be for Japan to reduce military ties with the U.S. Russia has no solution to the mounting dangers of war. The USMCA has said USMCA supports unbreakable, but impeachment delay comes currently to all of 19 by partisan majority in the House approved USMCA total of 193 Democrats like the bill after Democratic leaders succeeded in winning provisions secured back in the USA. USMCA comes a day after House impeachment. Trump lashes remarkable on Wednesday. House delivered strong review on Thursday, delivered high-profile bipartisan accomplishment. Democrats can walk and chew gum at the same time. A lot of the work on reaching consensus predicted impeachment proceedings legislation really gets bipartisan support, particularly when it comes to trade. USMCA will never move to the Senate. We'll consider it after Trump's impeachment trial in January. Posting to this might delay sending the articles. Even the Senate bills expected to get very bipartisan backing support. Is it expected from some unlikely corners? Impeachment proves issues are compartmentalizing, and overwhelming bipartisan support is resilient. No tech leadership internal link. Their evidence is just empty rhetoric. Sure, it might be helpful, but there's no reason why it's uniquely key. In addition, there's no tech leadership. Impact decades of research prove there's no correlation between readiness and peace. Assurances. Military presence ensures U.S. security guarantees are credible in U.S. 19 years in Trump administration. Little probes seem to be taking place when enters the U.S. military deployments that underscore commitments to remain strong so long as U.S. forces in allies territory that guarantees sufficient to have the confidence of beneficiaries. Troop withdrawals are generally made early in a presence if military conditions remain Trump 12 among allies remains unlikely. Tons of funds restore we discredit. Alarmist analysis surrounding 19 the TPP trade deal suspension of military systems inside Korea. Tariffs well blows uncertainty increases. Republican president steps of America first bid for re-election 2020 theatrical back and forth between Trump, Kim Jong-un, Japan feeling sideline modernization turns assurance. Clocky 13 mutual benefit China United Trade reality remains whether U.S. chooses to admit it or not. Nervous plan defense players only defend reassurance and a policy of denial. Respond by increasing capabilities of nuclear arsenal and new nuclear arms will leave no one feeling reassured, especially Japan in deployment of boost phase and existing capabilities solve any threat perceptions with regards to North Korea. No East Asian proliferation of green 18 security concern far more powerful than the great trade debate generally acknowledge author after author emphasizes that the multiple wide-ranging constraints that confront proliferators even if which are increasing security concerns of high holistic crime sanctions to remain. East Asia have a number of factors that are dominated by trade-oriented questions unlike the North American coercion. There are not so many oppositional nationalists. There's no impact. You misclassify my work from the case page about why U.S.-China conventional crises are inevitable, which means it's just a question of managing nuclear escalation. No conventional strike internally. Wadsworth 19. A decade of Japan have conventional strike capability. JSDF need time to acquire aircraft, weaponry, and training forces having a hard time focusing on protecting Japan. Acquiring conventional strike would be impractical. Coordination with the US would be imperative. Public opinion, limited resources, pose challenges would take a decade to equip and train. They haven't actually read a substantive link argument. They've read a bunch of evidence that lofty evidence that Japan likes BMD cooperation. However, it's not reverse causal, and in fact, there is no reason why reducing BMD cooperation would give them incentives unless it completely decked all confidence in the alliance, which is obviously disproven by other instances of security cooperation, including the exceedingly controversial F-35 sale, which shows that the nuclear umbrella is credible.
Alright, or do you want to ask a question first? Okay.
Want to make sure I don't drop anything. You did read the curls add-on, not the ASAT add-on, correct? Okay.
Okay, also just want to make sure reasons to direct the team were conditionality and kind of as a result of the after one more.
Yep.
Those are the only two?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I guess I want to sort of nail down the more inevitable warrants. The first one, the Thucydides trap. Why does that sort of ensure that China war is inevitable, and how does the plan sort of overcome this?
Sure. So our evidence does a historical analysis, and it notes that during times in which there is a rising power and a declining power, that there is a tendency amongst those powers to fight, especially in a situation like this one where they're sort of ideological rivals as well as geopolitical rivals.
I guess I don't know why sort of ending ballistic missile sales to Japan then overcomes the sort of discrepancy between the rising power or the current sort of world order in which a rising power exists, right?
Oh, no, we definitely don't claim to solve that. We think conventional crises inevitable no matter what. Just a question of making sure they don't go nuclear. Mutually assured destruction is stable unless arms are free.
Okay, so just a question of ending nuclear. So conventional crises between the U.S. and China will occur post-plan?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. The second one, flashpoints. How does the plan overcome flashpoints?
Again, same.
Just a same argument? Okay, just want to make sure. I guess I'm going to go into the counter plan, the advantage counter plan. The first card you read is in the context, the Zola card is in the context of previous missile defense reviews and sort of how those have not been enough. I guess how does this sort of take it doesn't make an overwhelming statement about sort of the nature of intentions in and of themselves. I think the Zola card.
Foreign policy outlooks and intentions can change. Look at the shift from Obama to Trump. Therefore,
Yes,
it's the capabilities of tomorrow that matter, not the intentions of today.
Yes. So the Zola card.
Sounds sweeping to me.
The Zola card makes an argument about the MDR and would not function, right? The intentions of the MDR were not enough. The previous MDR were not enough to sort of reassure China. I'm confused how this makes a
The argument the Zola card is making is that the United States for 20 years assured the world that its ballistic missile defense deployments were intended to counter only regional powers and not other great powers. Trump then came out and subsequently said, psych, we were lying for 20 years. These deployments are in fact and always have been intended to counter. The counterplan is the US saying, whoa, 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 don't modernize. We didn't mean it when we said that these capabilities were intended to counter your arsenals, but also we're going to continue developing exactly the same capabilities we said we were going to before.
I'm asking another question. The Lenoska evidence on the Japan disad, I guess it indicates that Japan likes U.S. security guarantees through military presence, but where does it make a claim that that's the only thing they care about?
It says that so long as there's troop presence, the security guarantee has the confidence of its beneficiaries.
Okay.
It is the gold standard for a card saying that it is sufficient.
Alright, that's fine. The thumpers, the Hirano evidence, is just about the TPP and how that means that Japan would be. Why would Japan be upset about pulling out of the TPP?
Well, I mean,
Why would that be enough to sort of overwhelm the entire alliance?
it was an important.
Rise to the threshold of ending some security commitment.
Okay, yeah. Our evidence indicates that it was a pretty important part of the Obama administration and Abe's.
Is everyone here for an order? It's the advantage counterplan, the NMS counterplan, and the advantage. Is everyone ready?
1 second.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Okay. The counterplane takes multiple actions to calm Chinese fears of the U.S. nuclear complex and to ensure that China will open up and be transparent about their developments going forward, while also limiting their vertical proliferation. Frame counterplane solved with you through Ethan's answer to the last question I asked him when I see cross-sex. He said that, quote, absent a reorientation of the U.S. nuclear posture in a way that accepts mutual vulnerability, China will continue to modernize. That is exactly what the counterplane does. It just doesn't reduce arms sales independently. If you do end up concluding that the counterplane doesn't solve the app, or that there's a permutation, or that it links to an amendment, just pick it. That's the most logical. Now, the permutation do both. It links to an amendment because it still reduces arms sales, which still triggers Japan to be worried about the consequences of that. They say permanent to the counterplane, and still that still was a reduction of arms sales because the counterplane doesn't actually reduce the SM-3 blockade, the SM-3 block missiles, which was my answer to cross-sex efforts at the motor, because it allows the 2AC to shift their advocacy and spike out of dissent links and counterplane competition. They say it links that have benefit default to the specificity of the links that we read in the 1 and C and that will be read in the 1 and R. There's very good evidence about why specifically the BMD capabilities that we are deploying in Japan are critical to Japan being reassured about the alliance. General assurance to China doesn't trigger this. They say adversaries only perceive capabilities. A couple things here. First is that the counterplane amends the MDR. Their 1AC evidence says that it isn't the capabilities of the new missile defense systems that are driving Chinese missile development, but rather the MDR document announcing the Chinese missile threat and the missile defense system to target those threats. The counterplane eliminates that irritant and announces missile defense is for rogue state and defensive purposes only. Second is that it acknowledges mutual vulnerability and reestablishes an attempt to extend the New START arms control treaty. These are efforts that China has requested from the U.S. to prove they are serious about arms control and arms limitations. Their 1AC Solomon and Mitra evidence proves those actions are enough to solve the 1AC internal links, and their Solomon evidence does go neg. China fears the U.S. is creating an arms control regime that locks in U.S. superiority while giving up Chinese development advantages. The demand is for a U.S. action that signals something tangible that the U.S. will give up in return. The counterplane takes multiple actions that their author says resolves the app. That's their Solomon evidence. Solomon 9 evidence, baby green. With China bringing disproportionate sheer treaty serving the interest of the United States, continue to receive mentioned Chinese limited analysis are seen as leading to tension with China. Agreements start signifying lack of Chinese analysts are generally uniform and advocating a larger bilateral possession on the part of the United States to start to process the U.S. expected to demonstrate a physical commitment to realize nuclear free world committing to the NFU principle are all frequently mentioned as behavior the Chinese analysts away from both the United States until some of these concerns are addressed. The analysts are low to even mention China's role in the process independently. Even if the right that capabilities are key, we access this. The NFU thing is binding, and as is the acceptance of the mutual vulnerability, which forces a reorientation of the U.S. nuclear posture in order to accept that mutual vulnerability. But that doesn't link to net benefit because of the specificity argument I explained above. They say NFU doesn't solve. Yes, it does. Chinese experts want the U.S. to make a statement that they will not be the first to engage the use of nuclear weapons in a conflict with China. The counterplane establishes this as a key policy change that calms Chinese fears. Prefer our evidence. It's more specific to China, whereas their evidence is quite literally about the Russian Federation. It's also from the 1AC. Here's more evidence. NFU solves and is the biggest issue for China. That's 1AC Solomon. If you were to central question China nuclear control disarmament for Chinese analysts, concluding NFU, agreed by the Chinese arms control establishes the major confidence building measure that will reduce the Chinese nuclear war, but Chinese leaders also require assurances from other powers that they will not be the first to continue nuclear attack against China's reluctance of the United States to support NFU demonstrates the Chinese experts that the United States is not willing to forsake nuclear threats and coercion and foreign diplomacy, even when NWS this is so calls into question the U.S. commitment to the basic spirit of arms control. They say we're relying a couple things here. First is that this is uncharted. Prefer all of the evidence from the 1AC. Hold them responsible for reading cards to say that all of this stuff is what should be done. Second is that it's not just lying down, counterplane would force a reorientation of the U.S. nuclear posture, which is what I described above. The add-on first is that obviously things closer to the area are much more important, like BMDs that are deployed in Poland and other weapons in Ukraine. The plane doesn't solve that because it only reduces BMDs that are relevant to Chinese vulnerability. Second is all cause of this Kana. 18 oil and gas reserves under the islands of Haven of the situation erratic with military budget surging and warships, coast guards, and fighter jets scrambling to assert control tension on the Ukraine peninsula drastically. As these three major offshore Asian followers are reminded of the various risks of conflicts in the 21st century stems from outside of conflicts in the planet. The world has been lucky that deterrence economic integration is shared. The states for the past 2 standard Western domination for the United Nations. Powers from crossing the Rubicon, and there's tons of all causes to Russia-Japan relations. There's no reason why SM-3 would trigger conflict, and there's no U.S.-Russia war that's Kuribuko, which is the only terminal scenario for a full-scale nuclear war that's Kuribuko. 18, the U.S. does that endanger the lives of Russian surface plane when all men and trigger the trip this probably won't happen. Russia knows they're shooting down the U.S. missiles will enrich anything less than 100% success rate with the astronomical dimension of Harvard international reputation in Moscow. By mildly ruling to Russia, Russia's military response to the U.S. and anything in the way. Anyways. concede the permanent test of competition, also concede that the NMS wouldn't recommend the app, which probably proves that we meet their argument about counterplans that result in the app. Independently, those are good because they're key to check back against small, predictable, and new apps. There's also no bright line between what they consider a counterplan that results in the app and other counterplans, because every counterplan potentially has the opportunity to result in the app. Condo, it's good and better than Dispo. First, it's real world congressional lawmakers, Jefferson positions when they're recognized as wrong. Second, then flex multiple guaranteed options are key to offset reaction and grind. We never know how the debate will evolve or what their answers will be. Third is innovation. Dispo and disincentivize multiple strategies inferior to AC straight terms. Only having a definite fallback option allows the net to research break new strats. Fourth, still debates. Dispo incentivizes teams to only read process counterplans because they can't be straight terms. Next, defense. First, diminishing returns on a limited number of processes. Check excessive condo. Second, 2 hour firms cross applications all abuse. Third, air neg. They get infinite path. The first and last speech and 2 airspin, which means the neg is constantly playing catch up. At most, reject the argument. Also, the other third argument, reject the argument. Case. The app cannot access any unique offense. All of their evidence is descriptive of how China has reacted negatively to BMD systems that we have already sold and delivered, but none of it is predictive that reducing future weapon systems will make China less scared. We recut their coup evidence, which is the first card on their solvency contention, and it's supposed to make the claim that the plane reduces tensions, but it actually goes our way if you read it. It cites internal Chinese documents as far back as 20 years ago, identifying BMD systems as threats to Chinese security, which proves that China has already been perceiving a threat to their ICBM systems independently. Other BMD systems that are already deployed, that's the MBA evidence, and the sugar triggered conflict, or makes it come in conflict inevitable. That also thumps their accident scenario because they're framing for the accident stuff was just the existence of the capabilities is enough to trigger conflict, but this proves that their capabilities have been existing independently, even if they do in a distinction between these capabilities and the capabilities that the average uses. That doesn't matter because they haven't made a claim in the context of the accident scenario about why only ones that get rid of ICBMs are key, but rather capabilities in the region are key. They also can't win that this BMD system is key. China has issued bellicose rhetoric over all BMD systems, including U.S. operated systems and systems belonging to other countries, which is the Reinhardt evidence, specifically BMD on U.S. destroyers, makes that impact inevitable. That's Reinhardt at all 15 U.S. have responded to North Korean missile to that fight from BMD assets. The United States deploy aviation equipment, destroys SS-3 Patriot advanced capability, early warning system, and advanced radar. China has strongly criticized U.S. BMD deployments as effective in nuclear deterrence and Australian street into stability strengths and veterans. Scholars make several other criticisms that BMD is undermining China's conventional missile deterrent against Taiwan. Now, they say that only future arms sales are enough to trigger the link. I explain the difference. But they say they get attitudinal fiat. They do get durable fiat. We don't disagree with that. But to say that they get attitudinal fiat to all of a sudden start getting rid of missile systems that the app doesn't reduce is obviously ridiculous. That would allow apps to garner advantages that are just wholly unrelated to the app. That's after topicality is a voter because it forces the app, forces the net to prepare every single possible topic at once. They say, no material unilateral concession is enough. That's not true because we have evidence that China's cared about other specific systems. They say U.S. political opposition to other BMD things, and then it would cause a withdrawal of other BMD systems. That's not true. First is that we've already given other BMD systems to allies like Japan, which they obviously wouldn't want to give back because of their security. Second is that just because they we'll get rid of one BMD system doesn't change the entire Congress's opinion about China. They say regional BMD. No reason that's true in the context of the other stuff above. The modernization stuff, they say that it will happen in the future, and that's not true. China is the only thing that they are working on is second strike capabilities, which are defensive in nature and don't prop conflict. That's the Logan recutting. Even if it wanted to, China isn't physically capable of offensively modernizing. There are massive technical barriers, and it doesn't have the production capacity, and it doesn't have the necessary supporting infrastructure. Those are the two Logan cards we read in the 1AC there, cut from the same author and article as their only 1AC evidence that China's capable of modernizing. Means there definitely concludes our way, especially when the article that all of these cards come from is literally called, and I quote, hard constraints on China's nuclear forces. Now, the last argument here is the accidents. I'll preempt this because this is going to be the 2-AR pivot. There is not a risk of nuclear accidents. That's true. Trace appearance go our way. Every potential false alarm in history has been resolved by safeguards. They pivot to this Cold War example. I'm not sure what this gets them, given that it is assumed by the church trace evidence and says that safeguards were enough to stop them. They say there's new technology. Doesn't answer the safeguards and checks argument in the church trace card. Just because there's new technology doesn't mean that there aren't still safety systems built on that new technology. I require sign-off from multiple different officials before an attack is ever launched. Now, the threshold is super high. Modernization is defensive, that's goo. 14 of China, you truly wish to use Islamic tactics would be much wiser to do with continuing by individually rather than provoking an MIT professor Pavel Noon. China is not pursuing expansion as goals, no military focus on internal control for every area and denial limited force protection. Market protection.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I guess the most important question is, why would China believe us? What evidence have you read that China would find U.S. pronouncements about its future intentions credible?
2 reasons. Reason A is that your evidence says that China is most scared because of the rhetoric in our missile defense review documents.
It does not say that.
I read lines from your evidence that says that is what they cared about.
Which line?
I'll go back and reread what I read you. Oh, that was the one. Hold on, I need to open the 1NC. So we read that part of the 1NC. Okay. Independently, while I'm doing that, I'll explain the other reason. 1NC Octos. The other reason is because the counterplan does result in a shift in the U.S. nuclear posture, i.e., because it forces the U.S. to adopt a nuclear posture that recognizes Chinese vulnerability, that recognizes our vulnerability to Chinese nuclear forces. It forces the reorientation of our nuclear posture, which is a material shift.
What shift occurs?
Well, offensive nuclear weapons from the region would probably be sort of switched around in order to form a more defensive shield around the United States, things like that.
Whoa. Several questions. The first is, you withdraw nuclear weapons from East Asia.
We do not, no. Don't put words in my mouth. We do not withdraw nuclear weapons from East Asia. But the counterplan...
But you move them around, so they're like a shield shape?
Okay.
What was that?
You're definitely strawmanning what I just said. Okay, a couple things. First of all, an NFU is very clearly defined, and that is a material shift in how the U.S. is able to use its nuclear weapons. That is part A. Part B is that we have weapons that are currently set right now to attack China whenever Trump hits a red button. Post counterplan, that's probably no longer the case. They may still be in the region, but they're not ready for Trump to just like hit a button and we launch like 10 million nukes in China.
So you demate the warheads?
I don't know what demate means.
You remove the warhead from the delivery vehicle, yes or no?
I don't know about how nuclear weapons work specifically. Look, I'll sit on this NFU thing. I know what an NFU is. An NFU would mean
it's a policy pronouncement, it's a promise.
Yes, and an NFU is a term of art that has material implications for how the U.S. government orients its nuclear weapons. And your evidence says that even if it is just a policy pronouncement, that's enough.
You can project all sorts of different policy proposals onto the NFU.
That's a great argument that's uncarded and that your own evidence disagrees with you about.
What do you mean? You don't have evidence that describes what you do. You've asserted that NFU is some term of art, but you've said that you don't understand nuclear weapons enough to tell me what it does. Why should the judge believe anything you say?
Because we read your own evidence back at you that says that even if it is a policy pronouncement, that's enough. I also, just because I don't know what the nuclear technicians on site do, doesn't mean I'm incorrect about the way U.S. is posturing its nuclear weapons.
I did have one last question.
Yes.
Accidents. You said that close calls during the Cold War were no cause for concern. I'm wondering, the example I cited in the 2AC, the Petrov incident, where literally it was one person under time pressure deciding whether or not to authorize the launch of nuclear weapons. They came exceedingly close per their own admission.
A, other checks prevented them from actually doing so.
No, they didn't. They were
yes, they didn't launch the nukes. They didn't launch the nukes.
Because they made a judgment call at the last second.
And B, other things have evolved since then because of incidents like that, is what the Tetris evidence says.
Okay, are you judging the I just said no.
We are.
Okay, just tell me. exception of defensive nuclear strategy and long-term contract in the air, President like nuclear on their other. They don't always become like defensive self-fear behind the threshold of the research and describing the value of fundamental elements and non-nuclear components of the assurance benefits mitigate public respect and eliminate prestige benefits reduce the role of nuclear weapons in regional assurance agriculture zero power rejection with multiple vulnerabilities the America would become unstable and states include other arguments of nuclear umbrellas Illinois evidence Illinois records assumes U.S. security commitment remains the same and troops ranking that's Frankfurt for 14 measuring U.S. commitment on the basis of the boots on the ground and that's traditionally the measure the measures of the involvement in operational basis of boots on the ground and best takes out the active troops overall China's perception of U.S. working towards mutual vulnerability the Iran thumper is nothing that was first no shifts in posture which is key that was above and second process that was more other were the result of intensive deliberation were eradicated in advance of the plans both from the blue that surprised Japan and third our evidence prices in India creates a break for Japanese development and the evidence only cites the TPP and Trump uncertainty writ large no reason why that affects Japanese-American relationship and especially not the security commitment and concerns of Japan about Trump don't implicate the broader alliance and in 1919 the Japan has the American investment demonstrated Japan's commitment to expenditure and exercise supported Atlantic initiatives and created a specific strategy the alliance and even the bullshit that will remain highly building all reservations without Trump himself the modernization towards alliance argument this is false China will be deterred if China is under if Japan is under U.S. nuclear umbrella which is BNGs which means it's not toward the status quo and the issue crossed by the Solomon evidence I read at the top it a lack of assurance and boldness China and the link Japan takes signal the U.S.'s physical transfers signs of supporting him when that is useful to deter Japan perceives BNGs a bedrock of the alliance and prevent Japan perceives BNGs critical to counter North Korea and China's perception that's shown on the episode of cooperation top priority the BNG are the integral part of the U.S. Japan alliance and the BNG serves an important role in the U.S. governmental alliances in the region of Japan and the U.S. share a long history of cooperation on missile defense and provides capability which accounts for the ballistic missile defense and create 300 missile vehicle region Japan and missile defense assets we have played all the role of conflict with China will read linked evidence to each missile defenses and the independent concepts first stages the strategic 18 nations missile defense the Japan U.S. military alliance ages and can be connected to the naval system and destroyer and be put the cooperative engagement in the block that significantly strengthening the Japan U.S. returns power to ages is a very small meeting with regards to Japan U.S. cooperation second the S&3 the block was developed cooperatively with Japan the key to assurance is historically significant that happened to the Japan missile defense operation S&3 deployed to S&3 to provide the procurement interception the Germany procurement and the H the first time missile defense was sold to military allied countries are developing block 2 interceptors in their area upgraded Aegis interceptors are able to be long range ballistic missile systems and key competitive information sharing what it's key to interoperability in the whole region that's shot heavy why skip that okay and the no impacting uniqueness argument, yes, impacting uniqueness. So the question of the link to the agree that it cites American coercion with soft pull from escalating the link cruise that the plan ends out at Pearl Cross 16 to the spread of 15 as spread of new tenants of your threats and international security nuclear war in the terms of instability of legal alliances where our states in possession of great probability that as we transition the period with they lack and the second trend that incentive use first and then prevent and strengthen the use of those approaches they emphasize of the alienation nuclear versus by playing their relationships and increasing the force with all adversaries back down on close mark the card close in the link not reverse causal it is obviously Japan perceives BMGs to be necessary to security stopping the sales as an assurance he war inevitable claims China war is not inevitable. This answers the case argument there's no scenario for power transition economics Western versus as you strong energy by global world any of the other big popular war China's ambitions on a foreign era and I'm sure Chinese foreign policy for the maintaining of the US has to be careful to remain attention to the top Asian priorities of liberal order of Belgium free trade and identification that will still change Europe facing the ego Beijing is metaphor a strong free trade of China's realisticity Beijing relies on a trade of ties and the low thing and digital word confrontation a market for confrontation the walls with recutting this recutting is mostly relevant even if it takes 10 years of perception of tech development and acquisition of basic tech capabilities which trigger a Chinese reaction and plans to avoid the weapons for conventional counterforce are pretty easy to find in US Japan relations are key to avert actually I don't need to read that part.
1 minute. Setting up.
Oh, sorry.
No, you can use that. Fine. Goodness, what my tissues.
Right, the order's going to be the advantage, the counter plan, the DA. Alright, is anyone not ready? Being the expansion drives reactor of Chinese modernization, risk nuclear war through accidents, framing issue only big arsenals enable an exchange of sufficient intensity, and the species and accidents are the only scenario for MBA, MAD, Chinese international escalation. They say our evidence is about status quo systems. That's not true. Really, the one I see it explicitly is explicitly the opposite. They say no all causes. First, there's good faith implementation means a broader attitudinal shift solves this, and arms skills base solve all their offense about extraneous advantage. They conceded the thesis that it's heated, meaningful debate about brain energy. It's the best literature. And then second, at the very least, plan signals lack of political support for aggressive posture, and they conceded that Congress people have to rationalize their votes. Forces a broader move and attitudinal shift. And third, unilateral concession leads to broader legitimate negotiations which solve that. They have no substantive answer to solve or a reason why the act is insufficient. They said, and the fourth, integration is key to credible threat and entanglement and general efficacy, and we're the only ones reading evidence other systems aren't sufficient to answer this. And they say no modernization. The load concludes app, and they say their constraints, but BMD motivates them to overcome them, and defensive postures are argument. There are still risk accidents, and they say no accidents. The judge can't cover the emperor's first Cold War had too many close calls. Technology has only made it worse. The second, US China diet will make it even more unstable. And see that there are lots of flashpoints here. The counterplan. First, excellent verification to both mobs of many excess solvency. Second, it links to the net benefit. And it is a renunciation of nuclear null and outside nuclear limitation to the argument. And they also don't have a coherent differential. And third, ritual research is a soft modernization, and leaders lie and intentions change capabilities are all there are. They feel weird. It's also SM3 magnifies all of this offense. They say want to see evidence. They don't reference a line specifically. They also fail to produce any more from that alleged evidence. And they also say board sponsorship. Don't vote on a counterplan mandate. They refuse to describe it. We can't make evidence if they don't trust with the operational constraints they impose. And also, the judge Leffler concedes conventional thumbs and grids and to modernize the only argument of importance of the soft evidence. However, it concludes AF and China will negotiate if there's tangible step, but they reject solely under general pronouncements and all the Kuril Islands add-on. Against diplomas are approximate cause of Russian military activities. Historical animosity means it goes nuclear. They say all causes following Romania obviously don't apply to a Kuril Island scenario, and also their parties in the context of North Korea tensions. That's a different thing. And also, yes, BMP's key arguments is hyper-specific causes reason estimated for the polarization, and they say no Russian war. This isn't in the context of a scenario. It's about S-400s. The Japan, the insurance is here. The insurance case analysis is compared China's defensive Japan couldn't first strike, and they say troops the late debate filter the analysis through the NOSCA evidence. Military president preserves confidence in nuke umbrella despite the uncertainty. They say it's just uniqueness. However, this is wrong. Troops function as triple R proves uniqueness overwhelms. They read the Fraser evidence. It's a sentence long and it's devoid of counter arguments, but it says diplomatic engagement solves it. Obviously, it's an also AFR laser 15. Reliability, confidence, overtaking security, interest in Japan are much greater. Alliance, so the most stronger commandments and intervention military. The US could distinguish policy. The US has an increase joint planning and high level discussions of forces to Japan, deepening and convince Japan or harder to the lines not to abandon it. They say the North Korean link interoperability is irrelevant. Sons of other cooperation to BMD is a signal of commitment to the region. There's no link. Residual BMD solves. First, it's 1A and 1B, and also second is the boost phase. They didn't answer this claim. The China link. There's Alex recognizes the mutual vulnerabilities inevitable. Extend the clocking evidence. There's offense. Archer creates more strength and stable balance and refusal of knowledge and precarity undermines effective diplomacy. Why 18 during the Cold War, simultaneous vulnerability willingness to fight illicit decisioning alliance, ability and knowledge vulnerable undermines the credibility of America's commitment to supporting the East Asian allies. Commitment is going to only be credible if allies believe America's willing to fight a nuclear war with them. Not knowledge and vulnerabilities. Just one of the Western class Americans, the inevitable commitments cannot be presented to when Washington refuses to acknowledge the risk. The internal link press, the internal link debate. No Japanese nuclear pro-life ideology, veto players and security concerns. Majuski 17. Japan firmly committed to not introducing nuclear weapons, saying no nuclear is national agenda, despite very concerns about nuclear China military environment support for remaining non-nuclear actually increase the legacy of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, leaving the evidence of the countries the war responsibility to forego nuclear weapons to Japan believes the nuclear bullets are necessary powerful players block nuclear acquisition. Avoid no feudal place, academic militia, military commissions, and instructional groups, and prefectural governments, or autocratic governments. Takes accesses and horizontal pro-life on a global scale, external soft balancing. Step 13. China stands for nuclear technology, constituting external soft balancing supply branches despite its membership in the NSD and the normal Indian integration of Japan fissile material production and proliferation continues because China worries that the US could exploit with ballistic missile defense and no conventional striving center covering of Wadsworth evidence and resource trade-offs, time, reliance and public resistance, and also empirical proof Article 9 is a durable constraint of militarism. Lift 18. What about security continuing rather than change their belief that it's all fundamental blows and emerges strongly persistence of concentration on military private striking on the key issue where he makes those all major changes in the face of political resistance and the modern era abandoned then Article 9 remains untouched. Abe but now back it is unclear whether Abe will be able to achieve a modest addition to the proposed last year. Japan's spending is not rapidly increasing without funding changes will be difficult. Concerns about security hardly guarantee a blank check.
Keep reading the Majuski part where you marked it.
Japan's nuclear energy program is a type of bilateral agreements and multilateral bodies such as the U.S. Suppliers Group.
Just remark it and
Mark it as Suppliers Group.
We have 4:57 starting now. Good point, order. Counterplan. Disadvantage. Okay. Everyone good? You vote for a counterplan that definitely solves at least most of the affirmative and that avoids a large risk of Japanese prolif. If you do conclude that the counterplan doesn't solve or that it links to net benefit, you should kick in and just vote that the dissent outweighs an app that can't solve much of its offense. Now, the counterplan definitely does solve the app. A couple ways to frame counterplan solvency. First is that all of Ethan's arguments here are very persuasive, but you should default to the evidence and read all of it. It says very specifically that what the Chinese leadership wants is things like less threatening rhetoric in our MDR documents and an NFU policy. Second is that Ethan set the bar very low for counterplan solvency in 1AC Cross-Ex when he said that what's necessary to stop Chinese nuclear modernization is, quote, a reorientation of nuclear posture and acceptance of mutual vulnerability, both of which are things that the counterplan fiat the first argument here turns to both. It conceded it links to net benefit because it still reduces BMD. I shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel here, and still triggers all of the links on the dissent. No shield the link argument was in the 1 AR. Don't let them make one of the 2 AR. They say the counterplan links to net benefit. No, you should default to the specificity of the link stuff that I will explain on the dissent here in a minute. BMD systems are specifically critical because they are a signal of U.S. material support, i.e. it's not just a question of whether the U.S. has stuff in the region and whether they're willing to use it, but rather whether the U.S. is providing Japan with the ability to defend itself. That is what Japan cares most about, specifically in the context of BMDs. The counterplan doesn't trigger that because the counterplan doesn't change that. They say rhetoric doesn't solve anything. A couple problems with them here. First is that even if they're right that the counterplan doesn't do anything material, their evidence says that's fine. Their evidence says that rhetoric is what's important. Read all the recuttings. First is the 1AC Mitra evidence says that the rhetoric in the MDR is what's intensifying competition with China now. Second is that the 1AC Santoro evidence says that China wants a nuclear dialogue about things like the New START Treaty, which the counterplan does. Third is that the 1AC Solomon evidence says that China wants an NFU policy. Yes, the 1AC evidence does say that BMDs are important, but also that all of these other things are just as, if not more important, which probably proves at the very least there's all causes to the app that they can't solve, which is a reason to vote neg. Even if you do kick the counterplan, they say it's lies. It's not just rhetoric and it's not just lies. We do feel a change in the nuclear posture. The NFU is a material change in the nuclear posture. It's not just rhetoric. It does change how the U.S. is ready to deploy its nuclear weapons. They say we've had dishonesty about the SM-3. That's overwhelmed by the status quo. We've been doing that. We've been doing that for decades, and it hasn't escalated. Also, all the other things that their evidence says keep probably overwhelms that. They say that is not a positive shift. Yes, it is. That was above. They say, they say conventional capabilities. There's no explanation of what this is. The counterplan also probably solves this through things like the New START Treaty, the curl add-on. A couple of problems with it. First is that the extent of the evidence they read here is good. Curls are connected to Aegis. Of course they are, but that doesn't mean that other Aegis systems don't. Also, second, didn't answer the other cause well enough. Yes, it is in the context of tension to the region. Overall, things like oil and gas obviously come. Third is that the counterplan probably does solve this because it's still perceived as a de-escalation in China, in the U.S.'s forces, U.S. forces in the region. Fifth is that fourth is that the dissent probably turns this because of Japanese proliferation. Dissent outweighs and turns the app. It causes proliferation within Japan. That's enough to turn the app because we read a bunch of really good cards about the top of the 1 hour about this. Obviously, as scared as China is of U.S. capabilities in the status quo, they're obviously more scared about a next door neighbor having literal nuclear weapons and being unchained from any sort of U.S. constraints that they might be imposing on them in the status quo. That's just a logical argument. They say that Japan won't first strike. We don't need to win that, but rather than just that China would be scared of it, which our Easton and Solomon have cards definitely say. They say military presence solve this. Didn't respond to the words in all of our evidence. The 2 AR is going to sound very, very good on the solvency analysis, and the link takeouts on the dissent is going to be very persuasive, but you should make sure before you evaluate any argument that each of the warrants were in the 1 AR. Otherwise, I couldn't have had a chance to predict the 2 AR spend and the 2 AR warrants that they'll come up with. Make sure you do that gut check before you vote. Now, specifically the military presence solve stuff. No, it doesn't. The Gorilla and the Roberts evidence that we've heard all assumes all of this and says that even though there is cooperation in the status quo, it is still subject to change, which assumes military presence and concludes the other way. Nuclear umbrella also isn't enough. A is that they prefer capability. Second, A is that they prefer capability. Second is that the Roberts evidence is specifically in the context of the nuclear problem, which obviously overwhelms just a military presence. It says that Japan doesn't have enough faith in that, for that to be enough. The link to be proper. They say that they say that other BMDs solved. That's not true. We read a link evidence specific to the BMDs that the Alpha produces. They're the cornerstone of U.S.-Japan cooperation over security issues in the past. They say no nuclear proliferation. This was new. The 2AC evidence was about how they will once spill out throughout East Asia, not Japan's will or capability. Be lenient towards 2 in our answer and probably wipe it off your flow. Independently, Mochizuki assumes that Japan stays non-nuclear because of the status quo security commitment. The link debate proves they upend the perception. The step evidence is also new, and it doesn't assume Japan's growing offensive role in East Asia. Only 2 sentences are actually highlighted and only mentions Iran, North Korea, and Pakistan. Prefer the Wadsworth evidence is more specific to the East China Sea, Japan, South Korea, and China, Taiwan. The lift card is atrociously highlighted and just indicates the way that Article 9 is operating in the status quo. The counterplan also probably solves this risk of horizontal pro-lift. Advance. Don't need to do much other than reiterate the fact that there are other BMDs that probably thump in the status quo. There's a lot of posture going on about how new BMD systems are created, but we're reading hard about how there are documents in China that have been inserted about these other BMD systems going back in the past. It doesn't matter what the capabilities actually are. It's just a question of whether China perceives a threat. And that's also true in terms of accidents, because all of those other capabilities should have triggered a nuclear accident. I assume you all are going to want a card down.
Okay. Case, counterclaim, decide. Is anyone not ready? Cool. U.S. pursuit of ballistic missile defense capabilities in East Asia drive reactive Chinese modernization risk inadvertent escalation vis-a-vis accidents. They got to the case with 15 seconds and dropped 2 embedded framing tricks that make it impossible make a negative ballot impossible. The first is that arsenal size is key to determining whether or not a nuclear war is of sufficient intensity to end the species. Only an accidental war between the United States and China could kill all 7 billion people on the planet, while the impact of their nuclear war would be localized, which means that there's a magnitude differential, and as such you should defer affirmative. There's no reason why they can access U.S.-China drawn vis-a-vis Japanese proliferation, because of also the second argument they've conceded, which is that impacts only matter in relation to accidents, because mutually assured destruction solves intentional nuclear use or drawn to a war involving a nuclear power. So only misperceptions of unintentional first strike can actually trigger escalation. They extend alt causes, but they didn't answer the 4 sub-point alt cause block that we've been extending throughout the debate. The first is that we get sweeping attitudinal fiat. I don't know your attitude towards this argument, but it was conceded, and you have to vote on it accordingly. Second, they've conceded that the plan results in arms control agreements and broader limitations, which also solves the alt cause argument that they shadow extend on the counterpoint debate. Finally, they've conceded that BMD capabilities writ large are not threatening for the effort towards China. Only integration between regionally deployed capabilities per the Carrico evidence. We're the only ones reading comparative evidence that assumes the distinctions between different sorts of capabilities. The counterplan debate, it extends the permutation to both. It mops up any excess solvency. This counterplan is ridiculous and obviously doesn't solve the AF. It takes the form of a bunch of promises. We promise we won't use nuclear weapons first. We promise that our BMD isn't intended to shoot down your ICBMs. However, the United States has been lying about this issue for 20 years, and even if they were somehow convinced that Trump is an honest man, even though they fiat that he is lying literally in the policy statement, statement that they implement, that even if they win that, they cannot be sure about future administrations, which means that so long as the United States is building up its ballistic missile defense capabilities, they are not going to have any confidence whatsoever. They keep asserting arguments about lines in 1AC evidence. However, you shouldn't attribute metaphysical significance to 1AC evidence in a world where they haven't extended any warrants from that evidence, whereas we have read evidence that explicitly says that capabilities are key and explained why that's true in the context of the international system. However, I'm skeptical that this 1AC evidence even exists in the first instance. In addition, they have the only real credible argument they have is that they cause some sort of material shift. However, they conceded the 1AR argumentation that because they haven't told you what that material shift is and it's inherently vague, that you cannot vote on it because we can't produce deficits and you'd have no idea what policy shift you're endorsing. It's probably insufficient. In addition, they just blow off conventional thumps. However, they'd still have incentives to modernize because they want their nuclear arsenal to be resilient to attacks from things like conventional precision-guided precision prompt global strike, which triggers all of their first strike fears, regardless of U.S. nuclear forces being postured one way or another. But it's only effective in a world of BMD. We didn't have to recriminate in the 1AR because it was completely conceded in the block. Not going for the Aegis stuff, we'll concede the oil and gas all causes, which takes out any conventional Japan war impact. The dissect. No terms case, we've consistently forwarded the point throughout the debate that China's defensive and only wants to maintain a minimum deterrent posture when it comes to nuclear weapons. Obviously, that means they only want to have a second strike capability. There's no way on God's green earth that Japan could ever develop an arsenal of sufficient magnitude to threaten a comprehensive first strike against China. They can only get an assured second strike capability, which means it doesn't trigger modernization. They've made several technical concessions to make it impossible for them to win a link. The first is that they've conceded the glacier evidence and all of our arguments about the plan resulting in diplomacy. Even if the plan causes some sort of shock, that shock is offset by the United States deciding to increase cooperation to dissuade the Japanese from remilitarizing. In addition, it also says that Japan is not going to embark upon destabilizing measures to adopt an independent security course in a world where they've just lost the great power sponsor that they believe would secure them from attacks from regional adversaries, which means that they have every incentive to bolster cooperation. This is a technical concession, and they don't apply any argument. It wasn't new, it was in response to a warrant in the Fraker evidence, which we explicitly conceded. Their only link work anyways is that BMD is the cornerstone with no explanation. BMD is not the cornerstone. We've already extended arguments that have gone conceded about why existing capabilities are key to check North Korea and why arms racing means that there's never a way for BMD to check China. Finally, they drop that there's no Japanese proliferation because of ideology per the Mujitsky card, as well as veto players. They only assert that it's new. However, it was not new. We read a no East Asian prolif card that was in the context of all powers, and then we extended new warrants because they read a new prolif impact in the block. The Wadsworth evidence wasn't extended. An impact to the Wadsworth evidence wasn't extended, but in addition, they conceded that resource trade-offs, all of the warrants in the re-highlighting. Good debate. Good debate, Mark.
have compiled that doc.
Somebody text me.
Nice, but I think it can catch. Did you get the summon thing?
Yes, I did. Question is, Sophia doesn't get carried.
First time we got to use that. I was very excited. Congratulations to everyone. The decision is unanimous for the affirmative on Highland Park. Go first.
I go. I ultimately concluded that a large risk of the solvency deficit outweighs the medium risk of it is sad. There's really an uncontested risk case for this conceded attitudinal fiat argument, which begs the question of the solvency deficit to the NFU counterplan. First is this conventional weapons thump argument. It's not a huge deficit. The 2AC card on this and the line in question is fairly short and the 1AR is equally clippy, but there's at least some risk that China will react to US developments of PGS in the world of counterplan to trigger destabilizing modernization. But I'm not entirely sure how the AF solves this either, so it didn't end up being a huge deal. The second, and I think more problematic deficit, is this question of capabilities versus intentions. The 2NR basically says to read the 3 cards that you cite. The first is this Mitra evidence. It's not, I don't think it's first causal. At best, it's perhaps no cause to the act. My interpretation of this attitudinal fiat argument is the act would just shift nuclear posture in some way to comply, and also the firm would solve that. Second, the Centauro card is probably the best card that you have going for you. I agree this means that the counterplan's concessions are sufficient to jumpstart nuclear dialogue. What this card is missing is a reason that dialogue results in stability or tangible concessions, since the 2NR conceded the 1AR framing that I can't vote on an unexplained shift in the US nuclear force posture. And I'm not even sure what shift that would be to resolve tensions given the existence of US BMD, which the 1AC and 2AC evidence seems to suggest undermines the credibility of changes to the MDR, because China still thinks we have BMD to maintain successful first strike capacity. Finally, this Solomon card I think gets you an alt cause to the AF that is also resolved by the perm, but doesn't say it's sufficient to rectify mutual vulnerability. Part of the problem for you is the AF is just ahead on the framing of these cards. The 2NC cross-sex is not going very well for you. So even if these net cards are decent on the efficacy of the NFU, the AF is just ahead on the debating level in doubting the credibility of those guarantees. So there's a large risk of a deficit, which then begs the question if it is that. I think the AF has a few cuts which undermine the risk, although not significantly. First, this Glacier link turn to the plan enhances joint US-China-Japan cooperation. It's kind of new, but the 2NR doesn't have any response at all. The card isn't great, but its implication is then raising the threshold of the link you need to win, because the plan still maintains joint coordination, which begs the question of the link debate. 1C link evidence is surprisingly good at substantiating BMD as the cornerstone of the alliance. That being said, that is the extent of the 2NR link explanation, and the 2AR points out the terminal implications of why BMD matters are North Korea, which is resolved by the plan's transition boost phase, and the fears of China, which seems to be in turn link turned by this white refusal to acknowledge precarity undercuts alliances argument. It's not net offense because the counterplan solves, but it's a means by which even withdrawing BMD, the AF can maintain the sanctity of the alliance, since your evidence says that BMD is sufficient but not necessary to maintain the alliance. And then finally, the question of prolif. 1C impact was conventional strike. The 2AR kind of answers it as the timer goes off, but there's a magnitude framing question extended at the top of the 2AR that diminishes the risk of this causing extinction. The other impact is Japanese prolif, which is fine on the impact level, but I'm not sure you have an internal link that says that Japan would resort to nukes. All your evidence is in the context of the development of conventional strike capabilities, and the 1AR card explicitly indexes the risk of Japan obtaining a nuclear weapon.
I thought that the solvency deficit was a little bit smaller, but the disad was also much smaller. Same deal with the case. My problem with the solvency deficit on the counterplan, and I don't think anybody really talked about this enough, but just like the way that, part of the way that the AF resolved the alt cause in all their speeches was this argument about how the concession, the unilateral concession of the AF spurs a virtuous signal of arms control dialogue, and Trump is looking for an arms control win, and your cards are kind of seem to suggest that when you make a variety of other concessions, that might also result in a similar dialogue, which might presumably even encompass some amount of BMD cooperation. The reason why I think there's still a solvency deficit is, one of the things you most clearly commit to in terms of posture is that the counterplan definitely cannot result in the elimination of sales of SM3 Block 2 and 2B interceptors, which they have an argument for why those are unique capability that China is uniquely frightened of because they have the capability of targeting Chinese ICBMs. And there's also still, I think, a link to the credibility of the commitments that you do offer to China, because the counterplan fiat's this lie about, on the one hand, we're phasing out this thing, and on the other hand, we're still increasing deployments of that. So I think those are kind of the solvency deficits that slip through to me, although I do think that you might have a little bit more solvency than Virgo's giving you credit for because of this dialogue thing. The conventional PGS all cause does provide some additional mitigation. The 2NR asserts that new start solves this. That is wrong, which is an argument that I'm fine with scripting in for them for two reasons. One is the block said nothing about that, and two is the 1AR and 2AR say that I should not care about your ad hoc clarifications about posture because you refused to answer questions about them earlier. The dissent I thought was very small, largely because of the impact level. The 2AR definitely does not do very much debating about conventional strike, but the 2NR also does not explain conventional strike impacts at all. The top starts with a discussion of why prolip is super important, but I think they have very, very good internal link mitigation. You don't have a great card that says they would resort to prolip. They have this green card about veto points and the 1AR card about ideology. The Glacier thing, I initially thought was new when I heard it, and I do wish that the 1AR and 2AR had a more explicit thing that was just like, here's what justified the newness. An example of how you could have done this is by explicitly rehighlighting the 1AR card that you were talking about to like highlight the line about diplomacy. But I do think the 1AR is justified in making the new warrant based on the NAG reading a piece of evidence that contained a new warrant in it about what is important for assurance, and they write a card that says that diplomatic efforts would be ramped up. Same deal as Virgo, not a link turn, obviously, but is mitigation. And then alternative forms of BMD, such as boost-based stuff, provide some additional mitigation.
I think I agree entirely. More of true phenomenal DA, more of Virgo counterplan, I think. So I think that I thought it was least close. I won't rehash the specifics. The counterplan argument that I think is most powerful for me as well is the capability versus intention. The 2AC card, Zula or whatever, just makes that argument. It doesn't really substantiate it, but I thought that the way that that was explained and contextualized to the historical animosity that China has toward missile defense was effective and just made intuitive sense. And I don't think there was ever a negative argument that even in the best reading of it just directly responded to that claim. I also thought that the just unreliability of the counterplan was difficult to think my way out of because of your difficulty in explaining it, and then the just sort of U.S. track record, and I'm not sure that it's really fair to say that the counterplan fiats that the United States be dishonest. That's sort of a stretch a little bit, but is fiating we'll reconsider while still continuing the sales that we're supposedly reconsidering, that would just sort of confirm China's concerns. And then DA, similar. I think I didn't even really think at all that the 1AR no Japan prolif argument was new, because the 2AC green card is about economic concerns about sanctions and stuff preventing East Asian countries from wanting to go nuclear, and then the only negative block response was craning that nuclear proliferation causes a nuclear war, and then the 1AR with the Mochizuki card or whatever that says it's economic concerns, it's also veto players, it's also the Japanese culture, and then the 2NR said you should wipe that off your flow, because that was a new argument, and I don't understand that reasoning. I'm not sure if there was just a misunderstanding of that, but I thought that significantly reduced the risk of a dissent, and then also the Glaser argument. More fundamentally or foundationally, kind of one specific thing and then one more big picture thing. I think that even in this debate, the 2NR that kicks the counterplan and uses it as case defense and then spends a bunch of time on the case and extends the dissent has a much better chance of winning the debate, because the counterplan clearly ethos-wise was going poorly for you, and there were also a series of counterplan sort of requirements that the 2NR had to win in order to win that the counterplan solved some of the case that were going to require so much time that it was just unrealistic to think that you could ever have sufficient case coverage. I thought the best argument, like of all of the negative arguments in the debate, the best argument was the defense against nuclear accidents, because that 1&C card was a direct response to the Cold War examples. It's from very credentialed, seemingly credible folks, and the MAFs didn't have a card to respond to it. They just had to say, but what about the Cold War examples? And that card is a counterintuitive Washington Quarterly tape that's sort of like a hot take. It's like, actually all those Cold War examples, we've exaggerated them, we misunderstand them. If that's true, there's almost no impact to the case. And so I think you can make the case very low. That complicates some of the existential versus non-existential nuclear war framing stuff, and so then even a lower risk of the Japan DA might be enough. And so I think that 2NR blueprint makes more sense. But then more big picture, I don't actually think that there's anything wrong with the strategy. It felt like you came into the debate with a pretty good set of arguments, but it felt to me like you were just not prepared to deploy them. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. This is like extremely complicated stuff, and I mean, even those of us who think we know more about it don't really know that much about it. This is extremely complicated, and so you shouldn't feel bad about that, but you clearly need to do some more studying of the nuclear policy area and the BMD area of the topic. But I don't actually think, as you're debriefing this, that you need significant changes in the strategy, but you need to be a lot more prepared to defend the strategy. And I felt like you sort of got punched in the CX of the 2NC, and that was going to shape the eventual outcome of the debate. You were fine in the 200, you were certainly better in the 200 than in the CX, but it was going to be hard to recover from some of those fundamental problems. Even just basic problems about, from the very first cross-ex, the 1NC cross-ex about the counterplan, what it does, what policies does it enact, how is it different than the status quo. You've got to be better prepared to defend it.
Absolutely.
I thought the AF was good. That accidents argument, you need a better response, so you can't just keep pointing to the examples that it disproves. I think that you're right, so you just need to read another card from a different source that says the physical war examples are, we should be worried about that. I also think maybe you have a card about this, but I couldn't find, just as I was thinking about during the debate, a card to substantiate your claim that like now is way different, and that the East Asian tensions now, or like the technology or whatever, has changed from the Cold War. It seems like the Cold War, if anything, would have made an accident more likely, not less likely. And so I felt like that impact part you needed to do a little bit more on. Maybe the only other AF thing is the argument selection in the 1AR, the ballot that kicks the counterplan and uses it as alt cause. I'm not sure that there are enough 1AR phrasing choices that would answer that ballot. I think the 2AR against that 2NR is going to be significantly newer, and I guess you were fortunate that that wasn't the choice that they chose. But here are a bunch of, like, basically China will never believe the United States on missile defense issues. China will never stop modernizing because they just view the U.S. track record as so unreliable, and they view the whole U.S. military posture as directed toward taking away their second strike capability. They just won't believe the plan. They'll continue modernizing, or they'll think the next administration will roll it back. That's I don't know that the 1AR had an argument that was going to convince me that that was wrong. And sort of perversely, or conversely, whatever, that made the solvency deficit of the counterplan much more effective, so that all of the same 2AR arguments that were a solvency deficit for the counterplan here feel like a case takeout if they're said and slightly tweaked by the negative. And I think the AF would be in a rougher position if that's how the debate played out.
The thing that I think could help you position yourself better against that, as well as against, and like also help you articulate a trust thing, is to have an argument about launch on warning and not just modernization. And the reason why that would be better against the thing that Batterman described about like the fundamental impossibility of long-term trust, because like your cards are speaking to like current capabilities are not necessarily a threat to second strike, but if the capabilities continue to be developed and there's quantitative increases, then it could be a threat to second strike, and that's what China's worried about now that is causing them to modernize. But launch on warning, because it's reversible, can help you hedge back against like the 2NR where they're like nothing is possibly trustworthy, because launch on warning is more of a thing where if you do a trustworthy, or if you do a positive gesture, they can respond by not doing launch on warning, and then with the knowledge that if the US reverted, China could easily revert. You know what I'm saying? So like that type of impact would not be as good against the counterplan, but it would be better against the all cause thing, because China does not have to be quite so confident to not do launch on warning.
Do you think that, or do you think framing it that way would make us more susceptible to like an operational NFU that was just like do demating, do like all of these measures, and then they can just turn on launch on warning if we ever start remating?
Well, that's why I'm saying you should do both. So like there's like a modernization component and there's a launch on warning component. Both of those are problematic now because the US has a capability that China is very directly scared of, and China is worried about future capabilities. So they're hedging against now by going to launch on warning, and they're hedging against the future by developing new shit. If they counterplan to do operational NFU, that could solve the issue now, but if the US continues to potentially do development, that might not solve modernization, right?
Yeah.
But then if they are all in on the all causes thing, you can be like, we solve a short term shift to launch on warning because they're worried about. Is that kind of?
Yeah, that makes
sense to me. I think that you're right that it introduces a vulnerability to that specific advantage counterplan for that impact module, but requiring the negative to read to advantage counterplan modules increases your overall strategic flexibility, especially if you're good on each of the advantage counterplan links to that benefit and sort of push back on that as well. Yeah.
And like if they're just going for a dissent, I think the launch on warning miscalc cards about China are better than the modernization, both because shorter like time frame and because there are cards that speak to like because China historically has had an NFU and has relied exclusively on like quantitative opacity to secure second strike, like survivable second strike capability. They have less experience with the posture that requires them to have launch on warning and like shoot stuff off quickly, which increases the likelihood that they'll like mess it up.
Okay. And then, oh, I'm sorry. Do you all have any?
No, you're good.
Okay. Do you think there's like a persuasive way to make the NFU links to the net benefit argument without maybe bolstering the link more than you might want to? Because sort of my thinking is that if I extend links to net benefit a large swath of my 2 ARs, just making a bunch of arguments that are quite helpful for sort of trumpeting up the magnitude of the link to the app as well. So I guess is there like a links to net benefit argument that's just compartmentalized from something that might also be applicable to the app?
You should just say NFU and the app are manifestations of the same strategic thing, which is what Japan wants is for the United States to have the willingness and ability to preemptively employ force. The reason BMD is important for that is because the credibility of that threat is affected by the perceived cost to the United States of preempting. So BMD would reduce that cost because it would like soak up retaliation or whatever. And NFU would reduce the probability of that happening, obviously by banning it. So it would not really get at this question of like putting stuff in Japan and like creating interoperability. But I don't think that argument is very real anyway. So like the much better link cards in my mind about BMD are actually talking about this like thing that Japan wants the US to do. So just be like, these are both manifestations of the nuclear umbrella aspect of deterrence, and there's no difference between them. And the interoperability thing
you
is
can kind of start by saying, I don't think either of these things links, but to the extent that the plan links, so does the counterplan. And then I think that avoids the concern that you're making.
And then briefly answer Judge Good.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you all for
Thank you so much for doing it.
Good luck, y'all.
I think this is one of your clothes. These are these yours?
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you have better?